You killed my mother.
Why? Why? You hear that, Stu? I think she wants a motive. I don't really believe in motive, Sid. I mean, did Norman Bates have a motive?
No.
Did they ever really decide why Hannibal Lecter liked to eat people? Don't think so. See, it's a lot scarier when there's no motive, Sid.
I know I sometimes complain that a movie doesn't really explain something or doesn't provide background or depth or world build, etc. But what we have to keep in mind is in those cases, it's generally not a conscious choice by the filmmakers, and it generally doesn't work. Because there's nothing wrong with not giving the audience something. And in a lot of cases, as the previous clip suggests, it's a lot scarier if you don't give them a clear motivation. That's kind of the basis for a lot of horror movies. If you want to make kind of a villain who's not really sympathetic, but is just kind of this scary elemental force of nature that's kind of incomprehensible to a human, there's nothing wrong with not giving them a clear motive beyond them being evil. Because that's terrifying, because it kind of talks to the fear of the unknown and the fear of the alien. And I'm of the opinion, if you can't come up with a good reveal, if you can't come up with a good explanation, just don't have one. There's nothing really wrong with that, particularly in a horror movie. Because in horror movies, they're kind of platonic in a sense, where a lot of the things that happen in the movies are a reflection of your psyche or a reflection of forces of nature, ideas or something. A movie I really liked, Sinister, was about the power of, how would you put it, the image and the impact of media and that kind of thing. And then you have Rosemary's Baby, which is, among other things, about paranoia and meant to generate the feeling of slowly going insane. So it's very often that, or like in Silent Hill or something, the monsters are a reflection of the person's tormented psyche. So there doesn't necessarily have to be a rational or scientific explanation. You can just kind of provide one in passing. And the big area where us kind of is a letdown is, well, the movie is good on the whole. The ending and the reveal is terrible in my opinion. It's not as bad as some things I've seen, but let's just kind of maybe go a little more into this. So films that had really bad reveals that ruined the movie. I don't know if anyone here has seen Hancock. If you haven't, don't see it. But in it, like, Will Smith is a superhero, and I didn't think there needed to be an explanation for why he was a superhero. But they added this, like, weird thing in that he was actually part of some ancient race of gods who had a double, and the closer he got to his double, the weaker he got. And, like, this has nothing to do with the movie. I actually developed a term called Hancock syndrome to describe movies that feel like two completely different films stuck together. Then in Hereditary, I would have liked it if they had have just kept it ambiguous, whether she was crazy or the cult was real. But they decided to not do that, and the reveal, I thought, sucked. Then there's Happy Death Day to You. I didn't think there needed to be an explanation for the time loop. I kind of preferred it if it was, kind of in the original, it was almost portrayed as God or the universe or something trying to give her an opportunity to fix up her life. And it was kind of a metaphor for self-healing. Whereas in the sequel, they introduced that it was actually like some quantum physics experiment, which was lame. In contrast, you have some movies that are really good that don't really explain it. The Joker's motivation in The Dark Knight. I know this is kind of a classic, overused example, but it's true. He doesn't really have a motivation other than the fact that he likes to watch the world burn. And that's what makes him so scary, because there isn't a rational motivation. He's just kind of an elemental force of chaos and disorder. And that works. And it's better than if they gave him some, like, I don't know what kind of motivation they could give him, but not having a backstory and him giving people, like, subverting it by giving them various backstories was effective. Then we had It Follows, where we don't really know where the demon came from. Okay, we don't really need to know where the demon came from or why it's doing what it's doing. It's terrifying, and to kind of go back and do a reveal would just kind of ruin it, in my opinion, unless they had a really good idea. Like, if you don't have a great idea, then you just don't have it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I guess before we get into the movie proper, Annihilation's another one. The zone is portrayed as being utterly alien and incoherent. At the end, they really have no idea what the alien's motivation was, whether it was transforming the world, whether it even knew that humanity was there. Very similar to Solaris, the book at least. I haven't watched any of the movies, which is about the inability of humanity to understand non-human life forms. And I guess just to throw it in, Michael Myers. So, that being said, let's start to talk about Us, the movie. There is going to be massive spoilers. So this movie I'd actually probably recommend you see. If you're going to see it, stop listening to this review now and go watch it. If you're not going to see it, continue on. Because the movie really depends a lot on not having seen spoilers. Okay, so this film, when I first saw a trailer for it, I thought it looked absolutely terrifying. I almost didn't want to see it. It looked so scary. It just was very unsettling. The idea, at the time I didn't really know what it was, who the kind of the shadows or the reflections of people were. If they were like, it was kind of a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing where it was their evil sides, whether it was a demon, what it was exactly. I didn't know, and I was okay with that. Was kind of the expectation. It looked really good. I was really excited, especially after a couple really disappointing movies this year, like Cold Pursuit and Captive State and Destroyer. I didn't do reviews of the later two because they were just so boring and incoherent. I tried to do a review of Destroyer, but I just couldn't. But I digress. So let's start talking about kind of the plot. So the main character, Adelaide, is a little girl, and her family goes to Santa Cruz, and they go like an amusement park, and she gets separated from them and goes into a hall of mirrors where she meets another girl who looks exactly like her. And this scene I thought was really good, and I think an interesting technique they used with the movie is they did a really good job with lighting. The actors, it's about an African American family, and they have extremely dark skin, like much darker than kind of the average. And the director seems to have been very conscious of that. So he did a really good job, I felt, with the lighting and kind of exploiting that. It's kind of hard to explain, but if you see the movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. On that subject, something I really liked about the movie was it portraying like a family of African Americans as like normal people. Like there's a married couple who obviously love each other. They have 2 kids. Their kids are just kind of like normal kids. They aren't like delinquents or gangbangers or anything. They're just like well-adjusted kids. They do stuff normal kids do. They get into fights. They play jokes on each other. The little boy is kind of wears like a mask. He tries to do tricks and stuff. It's something some people have been talking about, particularly with True Detective Season 3 and Base Black Man, as I call him, where they've kind of backed off a bit from some of the Black Lives Matter stuff, which I approve of. I mean, it's nice to see that in a movie. I think there is an issue in Hollywood with them not being able to make good black characters who feel authentically black, but aren't like completely unsympathetic, like stereotypes. Like, for instance, I think the 2 best written black characters I can think of is like Lando Calrissian and Benjamin Sisko. So like Lando Calrissian is very obviously, he's a black character. He has that whole Mississippi riverboat gambler thing going, but it doesn't feel forced or like exploitation. Benjamin Sisko is from Louisiana, I think, and he definitely has that cultural background. But he's a badass, and it's not really, it's just part of his character. It doesn't feel like he was put into the movie to meet a quota or something. So that's just kind of a side note. So she meets the doppelganger, and then she becomes traumatized and is unable to talk for the next, like, 10 years or something. So then we cut to the present, and Adelaide is married and to her husband, and they have a family, and she has her family, like I mentioned. The acting in this movie is really good. I think Adelaide was good. I thought that Gabriel was good. I thought Jason was good, and I thought Zora was good. Like the 4 family members I thought were really well done. So we see them kind of interact. We see Adelaide just has this lingering terror We see them go back, interestingly, because they go to a cottage for like a summer home, and they go back to the beach that they previously went to, and they meet like their other friends who are like a white American family, and they just kind of hang out, etc. And there's like a part where the little boy briefly gets lost, and Adelaide just freaks out and starts looking for him, etc. So the thing with horror movies that's always interesting is when they go from being... There's always the period of normalcy at the beginning, right? Like where the family's just going about their normal lives. Maybe they set up some plot points that would be standard in another movie, maybe like a girlfriend, some interpersonal conflict. And it's kind of interesting to see how long they go before everything falls apart. In this movie, I think it's about 15 to 20 minutes in where everything just starts going crazy. And it kind of came out of... not necessarily nowhere because there was some buildup, but it happened very quickly and suddenly, which I think they did it in a very effective way. I think even if you think the script for this movie is problematic, you can't really argue that they didn't do a good job with the actual cinematography of the film. So in one of the scariest scenes in movie history, one of them looks out the window and they find that there's a family standing at the edge of the driveway. Now you can't make them out, but they're all carrying scissors, which I like because it's weird. Scissors have a very deep cultural and spiritual significance, like going back to the fates and how they would snip the threads of destiny, that kind of thing. And so that's good. Also, the red jumpsuits are just very unsettling. So they come in and they force the family to sit down. And it turns out that they're them. They're us, as the little boy says, which is the title of the movie. So they're played by the same actors. And of them, 3 of the other people can just make guttural sounds, and they don't appear to have very much intelligence. Whereas Adelaide's double is able to talk, albeit in an extremely raspy voice. And it was pretty much at this point, it was very early in the movie that I figured out the big plot twist. So I'm gonna just give you a second. This is like the final big twist in the movie. Adelaide is actually not Adelaide. She was switched with her double in the fun house earlier on, which is the reason why not Adelaide was what I'll call the doppelganger who can't talk properly, even though she actually is Adelaide. But that's why she can talk, because she's not like the other doubles, not like the other tethered. So she explains that everybody has a double, and the double is an inferior version of them, that there's only one soul shared between them, and that the doubles are kind of a reflection of them. And at this point I was like, okay, this is weird. Let's see where this is going. Because I wasn't sure yet if they were going to be the only family who had a double in this movie. Maybe, I didn't know if other people would. I thought it was just going to be them. And maybe at some point they had made some kind of like monkey's paw deal that this other group of people would suffer all of their misfortune and they would enjoy happiness and prosperity at the expense of someone else. Or if it was like some type of therapy Adelaide had undergone that removed her negative emotions and she had gotten the other people together as part of like a 4D chess revenge plan. Anyways, so we start getting into kind of the action part of the movie where the various people face off against their doubles. Zora, the daughter, is a runner, so she tries to run away from her double. Gabe manages to kill his double by putting him into the boat motor. It's interesting. So the tethered, or the doppelgangers, or whatever you want to call them, are mortal. They don't appear to be particularly stronger than humans. They're just very weird. Like, they just move in very unnatural ways, and they've obviously had some kind of training for this sort of thing. They're just very stiff, etc., in the way that they move and the way that they act. But they can be killed, and unlike other horror movies, in this movie they actually kill them when they have a chance, which is really strange. So like, if they knock them down, they'll try to like bash their head in or something to make sure they're actually dead. which is something I hate in horror movies. Like when they knock the bad guy down and then they try to run away instead of like killing them. So they go and they find that their white friends, their family also got killed by doppelgangers. And we have kind of a cool scene where they kill them. And then they go into town and they're watching the news and they find out that everyone in America, or at least in Santa Cruz, has a doppelganger. And they've just killed all of their doubles and they've made a giant chain across the country. And by this part, I was just like, I don't know where this is going. It's kind of weird that this is a societal-wide thing. Like, there's got to be a really good explanation for this, because this has kind of gone beyond the point where there can be no explanation, because it's getting too specific and it's getting too public, and like the logistics involved kind of past belief. If it had have just been the one family, I would be okay with there being no explanation. But so they get caught in a trap and the little boy gets stolen. So Adelaide goes down to face off against not Adelaide. And we find that there's this massive underground hallway underneath the fun house that's full of cages of rabbits. What the rabbits eat, why the rabbits are there, that's never explained. But it turns out that somebody a long time ago made the tethered, who are exact copies of everybody on the surface, to control people on the surface, because the tethered exactly mimic the actions of the people on the surface. Except they don't, because they left the underground to go kill the people on the surface. But in some scenes they do, in some scenes they don't. So the whole thing was them getting revenge for being forced to live underground. But this is like super contrived. We don't know who made them, why they didn't just leave the underground earlier. I mean, they could have. The fact that they were able to leave at that time means that they obviously could have left at any point. So how did that happen? How were they able to break their conditioning? How are they able to do this stuff if they have like subhuman intelligence? I don't. None of these things are explained. And I get it. People might say that's scarier that way. But if you're gonna bring in all this like deep lore, like about this group of people, about like this underground civilization, like give me something to work with. But they decided that they weren't going to give you anything to work with. So it ends with Adelaide killing not Adelaide, and the boy figuring out that Adelaide is actually not Adelaide. And then the film ends, and it's implied that humanity has been destroyed by the other people. So that's Us. Is it a good movie? Yeah, it's pretty good. As a film, it's pretty good. As a type of storytelling, I think it really falls apart. It really kind of breaks down, and like the good performances and the good cinematography can't save the movie from collapsing under the weight of its own nonsense. But for what it is, it's interesting. It's definitely one of the more, I guess you could say, creative horror movies I've seen.